Later this morning in Arlington, we get to witness one of the most intriguing Big 12 championship matchups in the history of the conference. On one sideline, the traditional powerhouse, Oklahoma Sooners, winners of 5 straight conference titles. On the other sideline, the upstart Iowa State Cyclones, who in 129 years of football have never won an outright conference championship. We are live at Live by Loews. I am Parker Thune. That is Shannon Earhart. This is Gameday U, and that is AT&T Stadium, where the Sooners and Cyclones are set to kick off in just a few hours. Now, for those of you that know and love the third member of our crew, Caroline Grace, due to some circumstances beyond our control, she's unable to join us here today, at least where we are geographically at Live by Loews. But via the magic of digital technology, Caroline joins us from Norman, Oklahoma at our Gaylord Hall studios. Caroline, how you holding up?
Hey, what is up, guys, up here in Norman? You know, we're just getting through that little snowstorm that we thought we had. Luckily, it didn't really hit much of the southern region of Oklahoma, so a bunch of fans have probably already headed down, trying to cross the Red River and get down to AT&T Stadium. You guys are so blessed to get to be there. I wish I was with you, but let's get started.
Thanks for the meteorology update there, Caroline. The weather nice and balmy here in Arlington.
Perfect.
Now, let's start with the obvious. Oklahoma was anticipating playing a football game last week, December 12th, against West Virginia. Fresh off that 27-14 victory over the Baylor Bears on December 5th, they were prepared for a trip to Morgantown. However, the Mountaineers called the Sooners up on Thursday morning, said, hey, we got COVID-19 issues. We can't play football this weekend. So for the 5th time this season, Oklahoma ends up with an open date, one that they were not anticipating. And it seemed that the Sooners all very much looked forward to having that tune-up opportunity against West Virginia heading into their grudge match with Iowa State, who defeated them earlier in the season. Now, Caroline, let's start with you. How do you think this additional open date affects the Sooners heading into this matchup with Iowa State?
Yeah, Parker, I still stand by that. Look, Oklahoma's what? Back to back to back to back. However many Big 12 championships they have. Now let's put a bye week in the mix. I think that Lincoln Riley planned on intentionally resting players last week anyway, like any smart coach I think would do against a semi-bad West Virginia team before the week of Big 12s. I don't think Oklahoma could afford to travel again. Look at what's happening in the Pac-12. I think that this was one of the smartest decisions. I don't think it was the lack of effort by the Big 12 or Oklahoma or West Virginia. I think this is one of the key weapons that's going to help Lincoln Riley and the Sooners be able to prepare to beat Iowa State. If they would have had to practice all last week just trying to get by through West Virginia, think about where they would be now. But now they've had 2 weeks, a week and a half, let's say, because we didn't know the game was going to be canceled till Wednesday, Thursday. So I think this is one of the smartest things, best things that could have happened for Oklahoma.
All right, Caroline, sounds like you're a fan of that extra open date. Shannon, what are your thoughts on how this impacts Oklahoma?
You know, I think it was great for Oklahoma because it really minimizes the risk. Yes, they haven't played since November 21st, and Iowa State has been murdering the teams that they've been playing and gaining that confidence, but there was absolutely no reason for OU to go all the way to Morgantown when the Big 12 championship was already a lock. What's the point of risking health conditions? OU had a COVID scare last week, so it's good to stay healthy and safe, and I think it was just great for Oklahoma to take a rest and really focus on the Big 12 championship and that more impactful game versus West Virginia, which they would have blown out of the water.
I guess I'm a little bit more concerned than you, Shannon, simply because the vibes that I got from Lincoln Riley and the coaching staff and the players in press conferences last week in advance of the West Virginia game was that they all felt like they really needed that game in order to be fully prepared for Iowa State. What Lincoln Riley said in so many words was, we need to play games right now. They'd only seen 8 games thus far this season, and obviously everybody's kind of in the same boat in that capacity. But the Sooners were one of the few programs across the country that had not been subject to a COVID-19 cancellation as of yet. Granted, that West Virginia game had been postponed, but they hadn't seen any games wiped off the schedule completely.
I think it was better, though, that it happened later in the season versus in the beginning of the season because they were just getting their feet out of under them. So they were able to really play then versus where the Big Ten and the Pac-12, granted they weren't playing, but that they got COVID scares early and OU got them later where we're already up and running. So
5 open days, though. That's a lot.
It is.
And especially one that the Sooners weren't planning on having. They were very much looking forward to making that trip to Morgantown and getting a chance to iron out some final kinks before they faced off with Iowa State in the Big 12 championship.
Yeah, it would have been a good practice game. I agree with you with that. But it's too risky to go all the way out there and fly on a plane and travel so far and then possibly risk getting COVID and having some of their best players out.
Now, Lincoln Riley addressed the Sooners' previous contest with Iowa State in his press conference this week. Of course, the Cyclones topped Oklahoma 37-30 back on October 3rd up in Ames. However, according to Riley, the Sooners aren't putting too much stock into that outcome this weekend.
We're being very careful about trying to tie too much back to that first game, positive or negative. It's a long time ago, different setting, different teams are different. Personnel's different. I mean, everything's different. So, this will be its own game. The challenges that Iowa State presents are obviously still there. Still got good players, and they've developed too as the years went on from watching them and having a chance to study them on tape. So, but I'm confident in our guys. We've improved across the board. Our secondary's improved, and but we'll get a great chance to prove it here against a very good group.
So let's turn back the clock to that contest in Ames. Oklahoma jumped out to a 17-6 lead, courtesy of a couple touchdown catches from Jeremiah Hall. But lo and behold, Iowa State comes roaring back on their home turf. Xavier Hutchinson on the receiving end of a 65-yard touchdown pass from Brock Purdy that would give the Cyclones the lead in the third quarter. Come the fourth, it was Purdy keeping it himself from 8 yards out to even the score. And then for the win, Breece Hall, the decisive touchdown run to give the Cyclones the eventual winning margin at 37-30. And that is your final. It was the Sooners' second consecutive loss to open Big 12 play. Not at all what the Sooners needed to open the season. And at that point in time, Shannon, we really believed that Oklahoma's Big 12 championship odds were dead in the water.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you said it perfectly. We did not think that we were going to get there at all. Oklahoma was dead in the water, absolutely. And after that second loss in a row, I think that really boosted up their energy and boosted up their morals to actually get it together and really start something.
Now, Oklahoma as a program has never lost to the same team twice in a single season. So, Caroline, let's spin it back to you. I ask you, what needs to change from the first time that the Sooners and Cyclones faced off this season? What needs to change for Oklahoma in order for them to avoid that second loss of the season to the Cyclones and avoid making history in that capacity?
It's not any secret to any team playing Oklahoma. The key point is to make Spencer Rattler nervous. And Iowa State did a wonderful job of this earlier in the season, because here's the thing. Spencer Rattler's good until he's not. And when he hits that breaking point, it's game over. Now, do I think that Spencer's going to be a little bit more prepared this time going into Iowa State? Yes, but he's still a rookie. So we have to think about this in a realistic way. Iowa State has the tools in their toolbox to make Spencer Rattler nervous, to make him uncomfortable. The last time they had a matchup, he had 9 carries for only 20 yards. That's not good. He's going to have to move the ball more on the ground, and he's going to have to be more accurate with his throws. If he's able to reach those tight ends like Austin Stogner and Braden Willis and Jeremiah Hall, I think he's going to be more successful, but he cannot rely on guys like Charleston Rambo to always be there. He's going to have to learn how to move the ball whenever he has pressure inside the pocket.
That's right, Caroline, and as talented as Spencer Rattler is, I think opponents have shown throughout the season that the recipe for undoing him is to put him under constant duress, and that's what Iowa State will look to do today. Shannon, what do you think the Sooners need to change? What adjustments they need to make from that first time they saw the Cyclones?
I think it's pretty obvious. It's play calling. Play calling definitely needs to change. OU threw the ball 36 times last game. They need to keep the ball on the ground. They need to run more between the tackles, because they now have a big running back. Ramondre Stevenson is here and he's ready to play. They need to utilize him and utilize Stogner, that now he's back after COVID protocol, and treat him like Charlie Kohler, really matching him up against the secondary and giving him a chance to really play that H-back position and show what he's got. But really running the ball really helps the defense as well. It keeps them off the field and saves their energy. If they run the ball more and keep the ball on the ground, it'll be easier. Also, the rushing defense, they need to step it up too. The beginning of the season, we saw that it wasn't as good as it should be, as it is now. It's now up to par, and they need to emphasize that 88.1% rush percentage to really just go for it and go for Purdy and block Breece Hall and stop Charlie Kolar.
Now, you said it, Shannon. The run game is going to need to improve for Oklahoma. As a team, they only rushed for 114 yards up in Ames at the beginning of October. 47 from TJ Pledger, 47 from Seth McGowan. Spencer Rattler didn't have much in terms of the scramble game. He did notch a touchdown on the ground. But on the whole, Iowa State was the last team that really was able to contain Oklahoma's ground attack. And you chalk that up in part to the return of Ramondre Stevenson on October 31st against Texas Tech. Ever since he got back, he's been the bell cow for the Sooners. And I think the recipe for Oklahoma's success in this game against Iowa State today is a healthy dose of Ramondre Stevenson, because I think when you're able to establish a consistent run attack, it keeps the rest of your team at a consistent pace for the entire 60 minutes of play, which is something that the Sooners did not maintain when they were up in Ames taking on Iowa State the first time around. They jumped out to that early lead, 17-6, and then it seemed as though the foot came off the gas.
Absolutely, and I agree with you. I think now that Spencer Rattler has Ramondre Stevenson, and now that he has more experience and more leadership, that he really can just lead this team and lead this offense, because he did have Seth McGowan, and he's a good player, but he's a freshman. So I don't know if Spencer Rattler didn't feel as comfortable, and that's why they didn't run the ball as much, or if Lincoln Riley wasn't as comfortable with him in there. But I think now that Stevenson's back, that Riley's going to call more plays, and they're going to keep the ball more on the ground. They should, at least.
Isn't it a bit strange, Shannon, that the least of Oklahoma's concerns heading into this game is the defense?
Oh, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. It's so good to hear, too, because now we have Ronnie Perkins back. Both of those guys on either side of the ball are key players, and really, we've seen them boost this Oklahoma team and really bring up the morale. So it's great to see the defense really helping out, and Alex Grinch doing a great job on that.
Grinch's unit has surrendered 14 or fewer points in 4 of their last 5 contests. So
never thought that would happen.
Not at all worried about the intensity there, but like I said, it's the offense that's really the question mark, which is really weird that we're in this position, Shannon. Oklahoma's about to play for a 6th straight Big 12 championship in December, on December 19th. We are late in the season here. This is late in the game. And we're talking about the offense as the major question mark for Oklahoma.
It's shocking, honestly. Oklahoma's offense has always been so strong and so reliant. I think Lincoln Riley needs to make some good play calls, and the defense just needs to keep up their end of the bargain, because they're doing great.
Well, we're just getting started here on Gameday U. We've got our college football playoff predictions coming up in just a bit. Stick with us from just outside AT&T Stadium at Live by Loews in Arlington. Back with you here on Gameday U, just outside AT&T Stadium here in Arlington. Parker Thune, Shannon Earhart, Caroline Grace will join us momentarily from Norman. Now, Shannon, 3 months ago, I should say closer to 4 months ago, we thought there wasn't going to be a football season, at least in the Big Ten.
Insane to think about.
It's crazy how the arc of the season and the impact that COVID-19 has had has so drastically shifted all of what we know and love about the college football landscape.
It's been a crazy season, seriously. I'm just happy that we're playing football, to be honest. If we didn't have football, I would be so bored, and so would you.
Now, with that said, the Big Ten was, I believe, the last conference to announce that they would, in fact, play football in fall 2020 rather than postponing their season to the spring. Their hand was kind of forced by the SEC and the ACC and the Big 12 and all the conferences
Peer pressure.
that were adamant that they were going to play a football season. But Ohio State currently sits at 5-0. The Big Ten bent the rules last week.
Did they?
To allow Ohio State to play in the conference championship game with a 5-0 record. The rules, as previously stated, was that each team needed to have at least 6 games on their record in order to have a chance at the conference championship game. But lo and behold, the Big Ten doesn't want to leave out their golden boy, and so Ohio State gets the berth. They'll face off with Northwestern today for the Big Ten
I
title.
have a feeling
Now,
you're not a huge fan of the Big Ten.
well, I don't think any of us are at this point. But with that, let's welcome back in Caroline Grace. Caroline, your thoughts on the fact that Ohio State is very much in the running for a college football playoff berth with a 5-0 record?
6 games. 6 games. This is ridiculous. From the start, the Big Ten made the decision to opt out of the season. Then they start thinking about Ohio State and Justin Fields. And all this conference is doing is making it easier for Ohio State to get into the playoffs. This is just absurd. Put any team that's had to play every single team in their conference before Ohio State. This is just not credible. They don't have enough credible wins. Do I think that they could be one of the best teams in the playoff? Probably, but they're undeserving. It's COVID. It's a pandemic year. Why don't we just go ahead and give it to someone else who's actually put in the effort to play teams and beat them this year? This is all just a ploy to make Justin Fields look as good as possible. And you know, he didn't choose to play for a school in a conference that was going to opt out of a season during a nationwide, worldwide pandemic. But now you've got to change with the times. Look at every other coach in any conference with any team, Dabo Swinney, Lincoln Riley. They're all sitting there saying, we want to play. Does Ryan Day really want to play? If you believe that, you're really just fooling yourself. I've had enough of Ohio State trying to get into the playoffs with no history of any credibility this season, and now they're going to go into the Big Ten championship, play a not decent, not even good Northwestern team, and they're going to slide their way into the playoff. I'm not going to put them in any of my playoff predictions because I don't think they're deserving. And if there's any year that the whole country is ready to see different teams in the playoff, it's this year. If there's any year that the committee should put different teams in the playoff, it's this year. There is no justification as to why Ohio State should be in the playoffs with 7 games after the Big Ten championship.
So there you go. Strong words, Caroline. Strong words. Shannon, she says there's no justification for Ohio State, even in the college football playoff conversation. Do you tend to agree?
I will back her up 100%. The Big Ten is babied, hands down, and we saw that. What other conference can squeeze an 8-game season, well now 5 games, into an 8-week window? Let's talk about how the Big Ten changed their rules. We just talked about it earlier. They've stuck to nothing that they've said. It's solely because OSU can't play in the title game. It shows the focus on money, and the Big Ten's need to be in the playoffs. The board is being more lenient, so that happens, and that's just not fair, and that's not right. They need to stick to the old rules. Just because their best team couldn't get in, they bent the rules. Northwestern versus Indiana would have been a great game to watch. Way more balanced, more competitive competition, and just a chance for them to move up in the AP polls. Don't think that it's fair that the Big Ten Conference is babied. So, there, I said it. They have no justification for this.
All right, well, it sounds like the two of you are on the same page, and I will acknowledge I'm very much with you.
They need to stop changing the rules. Just follow them. Don't change the rules, follow them.
And to be honest, I would love to see Ohio State get left out of the playoff when we find out tomorrow morning the 4 teams that will play for a berth in the national championship game and a shot at a national title. Because, think about this, the Big Ten has essentially mismanaged this pandemic more so than any other conference in college football. Every single decision they've made, they've ultimately had to tread
change
backwards
it and
on.
back it up.
And
they're not sticking to anything they said.
They were the first conference to announce a revised schedule, mindful of the COVID-19 protocols and the limited attendances and travel restrictions and all that. So they were the first conference that announced, hey, we're going to alter our schedule. Then they were the first conference to announce, actually, we're not going to play football.
Yeah, I know.
At all. We're just not going to have a 2020 fall season. Then, once it was clear that they were kind of on an island in that regard and everybody else was going to play in the fall, then they said, you know what? Okay, we want back in. We're going to play an 8-game conference schedule.
That's an Indian
beginning in
giver right
October.
there. That's an Indian giver right there. They can't just go back on their word. And that shows how pathetic that conference is. They're absolutely babied.
And now, of course, they bend the rules to allow Ohio State, who is the conference's only hope of a college football playoff representative.
That's it.
They allow Ohio State an opportunity to play for the conference championship when the rules clearly stated If you don't play 6 games, you're not going to get that opportunity.
Hey now though. They're the Big Ten. They can do whatever they want.
I get that revenue runs the world. I get that income is what it's all about. I get that the monetary concerns, especially amidst this pandemic, are paramount. But seriously, Big Ten, is this where we're at? You're going to change the rules at the last second to allow for the one team that you have that still has a shot at representing your conference in the college football playoff. You're essentially going to kowtow to them and give them whatever they need in order to make sure that you have a team represented in the college football playoff field. The peripherals are not great, and I don't think any of us are pleased with the way that it's all transpired. And look, Ohio State, they're one of the most talented teams in the nation.
Agreed.
There's no doubt about that. But I don't think you can look at Ohio State and the 5 games that they have played and say, yes, this is definitely enough of a sample size to be able to say that Ohio State is worthy of a college football playoff berth.
It's not. It's absolutely not. I think sample size is a great way to say that. They've had a taste of a season. It's not fair for them to just be able to throw Ohio State into that Big Ten title game and have them play Northwestern when Northwestern has played more games. Indiana should have been that one behind Northwestern. They should have been the ones to play in that game, and it's not fair.
Now, the one conference in which there was never really any question that there was going to be a fall season was, of course, the SEC. The SEC was adamant from the get-go that they were going to play football this fall. And here in December, the SEC appears to be, top to bottom, the strongest conference in football, which is to be expected. There's a very real possibility that they could get 2 or even 3 teams in the college football playoff field tomorrow when the field is announced.
Yeah, the SEC runs college football 100%. I know, Caroline, back in Norman, you'd love to hear that, but it's the South. Of course they're going to play.
That said, let's take a look at our Heisman watch. And SEC players, probably you're looking at SEC players probably 1, 2, 3. You throw Trevor Lawrence in there, but out of the top 5 contenders for the Heisman Trophy, at least 3 or 4 of them are SEC players. Of course, Caroline hails from SEC territory. Caroline, who do you got your eye on for the Heisman Trophy this year?
Parker, can you say that again? I can't really hear you all the way in Norman. Did you just say that the SEC is the only conference that's playing good football? Like kind of what I've been trying to say all year? Just for the record, I kind of want to hear it again. Anyway, yes, my Heisman pick is Kyle Trask. Other than his outrageous stats of like 3,700 total offensive yards this year and 40 touchdowns with crazy wide receivers like Kadarius Toney, let's just break this down to the fact that last year, Florida was not really a contender because they had a quarterback problem. If y'all remember, Felipe Franks went down in the 4th quarter or late in the 3rd quarter, and Kyle Trask came in to save the day. I'm not sure what Dan Mullen was not seeing in practice, but why Kyle Trask has not been starting the last 3-4 years beats me. This guy has completely turned around the momentum of the Florida entire football team, not just the offense. I have to give it to him in every category on the field. He's a leader, he's dynamic, and then you see him in the post-game conferences, and he just kind of has that same swagger that like Baker Mayfield had or Kyler Murray, but he's more vocal than that. And I'm just really excited to see someone single-handedly come in and turn around an offense that had all the tools in their toolbox that they needed, and Kyle Trask has done that. Now, last week we did kind of see a terrible game against LSU, but LSU was not the better football team, and Kyle Trask did have a bad game. I write this off as just kind of a fluke, and I'm anxious to see how he holds up against a good Alabama defense. I think he has what it takes to overcome them, unlike anyone else in the SEC.
Yeah, Caroline, Kyle Trask, a pretty unbelievable story. He did not start in high school, Shannon. I don't know if you realize that. He actually He backed up De'Eric King at Manville High School in Texas. Was not a starter. Florida was, I do believe, his only FBS offer, and it took him a while to find his footing there. But once he did, I mean, you see where he's taken the Gators on the precipice of a college football playoff berth. They're not at all out of it if they're able to beat Alabama later today.
I don't know if they can do that.
Trask
Lost to LSU.
Yeah, Trask very much in the running for the Heisman Trophy, and many would consider him the front runner, at least until last week. I don't know if that performance against LSU.
He dropped the ball last week, too. Nobody was expecting that. I'm sure there was a lot of upset people who were making bets on that game, but tough to see.
Who do you got your eye on for the Heisman Trophy?
You already know who I got my eye on. It's Najee Harris. Enough said, 22 touchdowns this season. That is ridiculous. He even has limited opportunities because the offense isn't as run reliant. And there's that strong passing game with Devontae Smith. Yet he still puts up high numbers. He's a game breaker. I'll say it right here and you hear it here. Without him, Alabama is nothing. He is their best player, and he's their best running back in the country. In my opinion, he's the best on their team, and it definitely puts him in that Heisman conversation. With him, the playbook is wide open. He opens it up for Devontae Smith and other guys like that. He's on track to be like Derrick Henry or Mark Ingram. I said it, there I said it. But he's projected to have 1,500 rushing yards with a 13-game cap. That's insane. This guy, definitely going to win the Heisman. Not definitely. I'd say he has a very high chance of winning the Heisman.
22 rushing touchdowns. That is an eye-popping statistic.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Now, I can't believe I'm going to say this, Shannon, because a year ago, I went on this program, and I said that Mac Jones was not an SEC quarterback. I said that Mac Jones belongs in the MAC, as in the Mid-American Conference. I believed that at the time.
You being
I still kind of believe it now. However, there's no doubting that in general, one of the guys that's in the running for the Heisman Trophy year in and year out is the guy that's at the helm of the offense of the best team in college football. Right now, that is without question the Alabama Crimson Tide, and the trigger man in Nick Saban's offense is Mac Jones. And he's been really good this year, to his credit.
He has been very good this year, and I'll say that to you. I'll let you finish your point first, and then I'll counter you there.
Oh, so you're just waiting to
I'm waiting to pound you.
Jump in and tear my argument down. No, but I mean, it's as simple as that, Shannon. Mac Jones has been superb for Alabama this year. Has he been as prolific as Kyle Trask? No. Has he been as impactful as Najee Harris? I don't think so. But there is some sort of unconscious bias every year in the voters' eyes, as I think there should be to a certain extent, towards the quarterback of the best team in college football. And right now, Alabama's far and away the best team in college football.
Oh, I definitely agree with you with that. It's very biased towards the quarterback always of the top 1 or 2, 3 teams. But Mac Jones last week against Arkansas did not throw a single touchdown.
Well,
not a single one. It was 52-3 and didn't throw a single touchdown. Najee Harris had 2 rushing touchdowns. Devontae Smith had a touchdown, and some other players. But that's just embarrassing that he didn't throw a single touchdown. He's consistent, but to an extent.
Think about that, Shannon. How good of a football team is Alabama when they can put 52 points on the board and their starting quarterback doesn't throw a touchdown pass?
He's just handing off the ball, though. He's not throwing anything.
Well,
He's not showcasing his talent.
It's not at all a credit to Mac Jones, is what I'm saying. It's a credit to Alabama.
Oh,
that team is so far and away above everyone else across the landscape.
Saban's run the table with that team for years, so well deserving.
Speaking of the college football playoff, our playoff predictions come your way next. Is it Caroline or Shannon or myself that will end up with the most accurate field tomorrow morning when it's announced? We'll find out. Stay with us on Gameday U. Counting down to the Big 12 championship at AT&T Stadium, Parker Thune, alongside Shannon Earhart. Caroline Grace will join us in just a moment. Shannon, what kind of pregame show would we be if we only talked about the game that we're about to cover here this morning between Iowa State and Oklahoma? So, you know what?
I think it'd be pretty lame, honestly. If you're really asking me, I don't think it'd be as good. I know not everybody that watches the show is an OU fan or an Iowa State fan, so got to mix it up a little bit, put in some other college football teams.
With that in mind, let's make our college football playoff predictions, because we're just over 24 hours away from the announcement of the 2020 college football playoff field. And of course, this process promises to be as convoluted as it ever has, just because you've got teams such as Ohio State that have played 6 games. You've got a Coastal Carolina team that has played 11 games and is 11-0, and everyone else is somewhere in between in terms of how many games that they've played. Now let's welcome back Caroline Grace up in our Gaylord Hall studios in Norman, Oklahoma. Caroline, who do you like in the college football playoff field this year?
Alrighty, well, let's get this started. Now, bear with me. I've got Alabama going in seated as number 1. That's no surprise. I think that they're going to beat Florida next week in the SEC Championship after the lousy play that Florida came off of against LSU. Although I do think they're going to spark up a good game, I don't think it is going to be enough to overcome Alabama, but I'm not going to put it on Kyle Trask. I know I just went on about his Heisman campaign. After that, I've got Notre Dame. I do not think that Trevor Lawrence was a make-or-break situation for the Clemson-Notre Dame game that we saw earlier in the season. So I think Notre Dame once again takes over Clemson. After that, I've got A&M. Why not? The only reason that they're not in the SEC Championship is the way that the SEC is set up with the East and the West. But they beat Florida in the head-to-head, and they are clearly the second-best team in the SEC. After that, hear me out. I have Iowa State, because I think that Iowa State is going to beat Oklahoma in the Big 12 Championship. With that being said, right now, before the game, they're tied with 8-2 with Florida. After Alabama beats Florida in the SEC Championship, that moves Iowa State up. I think the College Football Committee gets fed up with Ohio State. And as a matter of fact, they shouldn't let Ryan Day or the Big Ten bully them just because of reputation. Ohio State is out. They have nothing credible to put them into the college football playoff. So I've got Alabama, Notre Dame, A&M, Iowa State. And this is really important for Matt Campbell and the Cyclones. After this, I think so many heads are going to turn to Matt Campbell. And with so many jobs that are going to open up right now, we've already seen many head coaching jobs open up. I think this is going to be perfect for him to slide into a bigger position somewhere else. Maybe Auburn.
Caroline, I don't know how you just managed to tie that all the way back to Auburn, but it was impressive. I'll say that. Now, Shannon, Iowa State. Caroline's got Iowa State in her playoff field. I'm guessing you're not on the same page based on your reaction there?
Oh, I am not on the same page at all, Parker. Iowa State. Caroline, what are you thinking there? No way. Oklahoma's going to beat Iowa State today. We'll talk about that later, so absolutely no chance.
Wow, way to be a spoiler with your prediction there, Shannon.
Sorry, spoiler.
Who's your field?
All right, I got Alabama, Clemson, Notre Dame, and then OSU. You're probably looking at that Clemson-Notre Dame thinking, how could 2 ACC teams get in? But Clemson will beat Notre Dame with Trevor Lawrence. It was close last time, but now they got Lawrence. And they deserve to get that best of 3 if it's a good matchup and Clemson wins. Notre Dame won out. Clemson has that one loss to the Irish. If they split and Clemson wins, they both secure a spot in the playoff. Ohio State plays Northwestern. They'll win that Big Ten championship hands down. They're not going to lose. Florida, no chance. They just lost to LSU, so they're ruined. And then anything for A&M except their O-line is awful. I don't know how they've gotten this far. Maybe it's the schedule and the fact that they didn't play Clemson and they didn't play Georgia. Schedule is weak. So I think it's a good prediction. Alabama's a lock. That's guaranteed. But it's going to be Alabama, Clemson, Notre Dame, and then Ohio State, 100%.
Shannon, who would have imagined at this season's outset, I mean, this is just kind of indicative of the way that 2020 has gone, but who would have ever imagined that we would legitimately be talking about 2 ACC teams in the college football playoff field? If there was one conference that had no hope of getting 2 teams into the field, you would have thought it was probably the ACC. Well, the Pac-12 is also awful.
I was going to say Pac-12.
To be fair, Clemson ran the ACC, and then Notre Dame shows up. First season as an ACC school, Notre Dame beats Clemson, and is now they're in the catbird seat.
They're trying to take that big boy spot.
Because if Notre Dame wins, they're in the playoff, Clemson's out. Even if they lose, they're probably still in the playoff at this point. Notre Dame is in as safe a situation as anybody right now. My college football playoff field, I have Alabama at number 1. And we talked about Mac Jones, we talked about Najee Harris, we talked about everything this team brings to the table. Nick Saban is simply a recruiting monster. The man has built a beast down at Alabama. And the Crimson Tide are well on their way to another national championship. I really got to see anybody play them close at this point before I believe it can be done. They had a down year last year, missed the college football playoff for the first time, and Saban and his squad came back with a vengeance. Now, my number 2 seed, I like Clemson. I think the Tigers are going to beat Notre Dame tonight. I think getting Trevor Lawrence back is obviously big. DJ Uiagalelei, as good as he is no Trevor Lawrence, and Lawrence will be the difference this time around. Comes and gets revenge. My number 3 seed, Texas A&M, because
No way.
No, believe me on this, Shannon. They're going to beat Tennessee today. Texas A&M will conclude the season 7-1, or it might be 8-1. I'm not at all. I'm not quite sure on that, but regardless, A&M's going to finish the season with just one loss. That one loss coming to Alabama. I don't like it either, but they're going to end up in the field.
Do you really think Kellen Mond can do it?
No,
Do you
not
really
at all.
think he's a big enough guy and a strong enough guy to lead this A&M team?
No, not at
No.
all. But 4th seed, I have Notre Dame. Like I said, I think Clemson beats Notre Dame, but Notre Dame's in a solid position where even if they fall to Clemson, they're probably still getting in, because who are you going to replace him with?
Nobody. I'd love to see those 2 ACC teams there. I agree with you, everything except Texas A&M, but not as bad as Caroline's Iowa State.
I omit Ohio State because I truly do think that the committee is going to look at Ohio State versus a one-loss Notre Dame tomorrow when the decision gets finalized and say, okay, we can't put Ohio State in the playoff based on a 6-game field.
No, they're going to be soft. The committee's going to be soft towards OSU and put them in for sure. They're going to see OSU pummel Northwestern and think, yeah, they deserve a spot, when they don't. But I don't like to say it. It's going to happen.
Quick aside here, I know Caroline is probably eager to discuss the head coaching carousel because, of course, her hometown Auburn Tigers just fired Gus Malzahn, as she referenced earlier. Caroline, your thoughts on Malzahn getting canned down in Auburn?
Yeah, honestly, I don't think that I've gathered all of my thoughts on this whole situation. For one, why is anyone getting fired during a pandemic year? I mean, he went 6-4 and playing every team in the SEC. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Do I think that he's been producing the way he should have over the past couple of years? No, but he recruits well, and he's the only coach in the SEC that seems to be able to beat Nick Saban. So, not that I don't think he hasn't been producing the way he should have, but who else is going to? I don't like any of the candidates that they've thrown into the hat. Maybe Steve Sarkisian, but the likely chance that Auburn's going to take an Alabama offensive coordinator, I'm just not so sure that this was the right decision. A couple of days before signing day, knowing how good of a recruiter Gus Malzahn is, the players are clearly upset if you've looked at any form of social media. So was it the right decision? Not for the time. And I think that the lasting effects of that are going to be brutal. Also considering it was like a $21 million buyout. I don't think Auburn could afford that right now, and they definitely should have given him another season.
Caroline, your school's not really doing themselves any favors in terms of stability, especially in that Iron Bowl rivalry when you got Nick Saban, who's been there since 2007. Now Auburn, fresh off a 5-4 campaign, fires Malzahn. They'll be looking in a different direction. Now, Caroline brought up Matt Campbell, who I believe is probably going to be the most sought-after coach in the coaching carousel this offseason. He's going to get offers for interviews at a variety of places. I think Michigan's moving on from Jim Harbaugh.
Oh, Jim Harbaugh needs to get out of there. He's old news. I said that 2 years ago on Gameday U, that he needs to get out and find somewhere else to go or retire. Matt Campbell, I would also say that he's maybe looking for something more. So
it'll be interesting to see how long Oklahoma can hang on to Alex Grinch, because he's also going to be
I think he's loyal. I think he'll stay true to the Sooners and stick with them. He's had a great year so far, and we've seen that. We've seen that improvement in defense. So I think Grinch stays.
We shall see. Now, let's talk about a few of the teams on the bubble in terms of the college football playoff picture,
Sure.
Shannon. Let's start with Coastal Carolina, because they're 11-0, the only 11-0 team in the nation. And we found out Thursday night that their conference championship matchup against Louisiana, which would have given them a shot at a third top 25 win on the 2020 campaign and a chance at a 12-0 record, that game got canceled due to Coastal Carolina's own COVID-19 concerns. I mean, what else can the Chanticleers do than what they've already done here? I mean, Notre Dame's 10-0 with one top 25 win. Coastal Carolina's 11-0 with 2 top 25 wins. How are they not getting respected more than they are?
Nobody would have guessed that. If you would have told me that Coastal Carolina would be undefeated, I would have laughed in your face and told you, yeah, okay, you're right. It's impressive what they've done, and I think it's impressive, too, that they scheduled that BYU game in place of that Louisiana game and
won.
Played it and really went out for it. But let's be honest here. If we're talking about Coastal Carolina facing one of the top 4 teams in the nation, They have no chance. They have no chance at all. They're not a good enough football team, and they won't be able to play with the big dogs at all.
Cincinnati, on a similar note, currently ranked number 9 in the nation. Now,
that's shocking too. That's shocking too to think that Cincinnati is so far up as well, right behind Oklahoma. So it's interesting to see both of those teams really progress this season and show something different. It's 2020, so it's funny to see.
Now Cincinnati's undefeated.
Yeah.
Out of the AAC. No top 25 wins, but they are undefeated. What
It's
are your
because
thoughts on the Bearcats?
their schedule is just weak, and they don't play good enough teams to really advance their placement in the AP poll. So Cincinnati's sitting, I think, pretty where they're at, and they should be thankful that they're sitting there.
Now they've got an opportunity to win the AAC championship over Tulsa. Tulsa's another really interesting success story because were it not for a really awful performance in week 1 on the road against Oklahoma State, a game that they still very nearly won, they could be undefeated right now too.
Yeah, all three of those teams are really looking for storybook endings. So it'll be a fight for the best out of the worst, I guess. But now they're looking pretty good. They're looking comparable to the teams in their conferences. But if they were going to go up and face Oklahoma, pummeled.
Quick thought here on that note. Is there any path for Oklahoma to the playoff tomorrow?
No. I do not think there's a path for Oklahoma to the playoff. Unless something obscure happens, I don't think that's going to happen at all. I think it would be great to see Oklahoma play in that bowl game with A&M. That would be a great game to watch. But we'll see. We'll see what happens.
They've got to get past Iowa State first. And coming up next here on Game Day U, we'll wrap up with our predictions for today's game from AT&T Stadium. Stick with us. Winding down to kickoff here at AT&T Stadium for the Big 12 championship between Oklahoma and Iowa State.
Woo.
I'm Parker Thune. That's Shannon Earhart. We'll be joined in just a moment by Caroline Grace back in our Gaylord Hall studios in Norman. Shannon, you think we got time for brunch after this between now and kickoff?
I think we do. We can fit in a quick little snack.
All right, let's whiz through this. And let's start with key matchups to take a look at. Individual matchups here today between the Sooners and Cyclones. Caroline, who do you got your eye on?
I'm going with the Norman native Charlie Kohler versus Brendan Radley Hiles. So check this out. Charlie Kohler is 6'6", 258 pounds. Bookie, 5'8", 5'9", 185 pounds. Just looking at it on paper, this is outrageous. He outsizes him in every category. And we saw this matchup earlier in the season, and it did not go well. Bookie is really going to have to step up and play his position, or Alex Grinch is going to have to make some big adjustments. I just don't think that Bookie stands a chance against Charlie Kohler. Every time he's up against big guys like that, it's just penalty after penalty, and that's something that the Sooners cannot afford this weekend. So I'm interested to see that matchup specifically, but also all of the wide receivers, all of the tight ends against our secondary because they are large. And their tight ends, H-backs, they play like Shane Beamer's tight ends and H-backs. So I hope that all of our secondary has been paying attention during practice because it's not looking good. It didn't look good earlier in the season, and now I don't think anything's going to change because Alex Grinch has yet to make the decision to get Bookie off the field.
Caroline's really not a fan of Bookie Radley Hiles. That much is evident. Okay, Shannon, which matchup are you focusing in on today?
I'm focusing in on Breece Hall in the front 7. Hall has 1,500 all-purpose yards. He is such a solid player. He's the top offensive player in the Big 12 and hands down the best player on Iowa State. He's good at making something out of nothing and gaining yards, so it's going to be a challenge for the front 7. What OU needs to do is control the run and shut him down. Sacks and quarterback pressure on Purdy is really going to help. ISU offense is led by Purdy and Hall. If Purdy is shut down, so is Breece Hall, and vice versa. OU has a deep front 7 with Ronnie Perkins and David Agwebu and Nick Bonito. So if they wrap up Breece Hall, there's going to be no energy to this offense, and they're going to shut down the Cyclones altogether. Without Breece Hall, there is no production for Iowa State.
The Cyclones have a defensive player that is every bit as talented as Breece Hall, and that is Jaquan Bailey, their star defensive end, who somehow did not win Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year earlier this week. But make no mistake, this guy is a game wrecker, and it'll be really interesting to see whether Eric Swenson at left tackle can mitigate Bailey's impact on this game. The first time around when they faced off, Bailey had 6 tackles, 1 for loss. So not a hugely productive game by any means, but still very much made an impact. And he is one of the finest pass rushers in the Big 12. So it's going to be paramount for the Sooners today that Swenson is able to keep the pocket clean for Spencer Rattler and protect his blind side. All right, final words. Caroline, let's bring you back. What is your final word?
Another week goes by, and here we are at final words, call-outs, and score predictions. With that being said, my final word is revenge. Lincoln Riley is a mentality-style coach. You hear him talk about that all the time on his social media platforms. Well, revenge. The Sooners have got to go into this game with that mentality. They've got to think, what did we do last time that we can do better this time? They've got to be able to own up to their mistakes, and they've got to fight because this Iowa State team is not going to give up this championship easily.
Revenge. I like it. Okay, Caroline, let's turn to Shannon now. Shannon, what is your final word?
I like revenge, Caroline. I like that a lot. But vigor is my final word. This is going to be a battle of the best for that trophy, and I cannot wait to see them just come out with enthusiasm and just that energy that really brings the game alive. It'll be great to see both OU and Iowa State battle for this, and OU really battle for revenge, and Iowa State having that win under their belt. It's going to be a really interesting game.
My final word is reckoning, and that's because this really is a reckoning in a lot of ways for Oklahoma. Matt Campbell in his 5th season at Iowa State is really the only guy that can potentially lay claim to Lincoln Riley's crown, what you would presume right now is Lincoln Riley's crown, as the best coach in the Big 12. What Matt Campbell has done in Ames is nothing short of remarkable. With a victory today, Campbell could become the first coach to beat Oklahoma twice in the same season in program history. He could also end Oklahoma's reign of dominance in the Big 12, lead Iowa State to their first conference title ever, and end the Sooner streak of 5 straight.
It's very possible. It's very possible, and I like that you say that Matt Campbell could take down Lincoln Riley's crown. It's not inevitable at all. It's very easily could happen.
So this is a reckoning today for Oklahoma. They have a lot of things to validate with a victory today.
Good final word.
Oh, wow, I guess I did. Did I double up on the final words
You
there?
did.
I guess so. Reckoning and validate. Okay, there we go. All right, Sooner call-outs. Caroline, who are you calling out today?
Okay, after my spiel, I think it goes without saying that my call-out is Buki. I like your heart, I like your determination, and I like your grit, but you have got to be a smarter player. Work smarter, not harder. I know it's kind of hard given the size matchups you're about to face, but you can do this. If Alex Grinch is confident enough to put you in the game, do your job and do it right.
Doubling up on Buki. Okay, interesting. So we're really focusing in on him today as one of the guys that needs to perform for Oklahoma, and it's very understandable because Charlie Kohler is one of the most dangerous tight ends in the entire country. So Buki Radley-Hiles, if he draws that assignment, going to have a lot on his shoulders. Who are you calling out?
Ramondre Stevenson, duh, he didn't play the first time against Iowa State. This is his time to shine. I'm not even going to mention his immediate impact he's had on this Sooners offense. He needs to come out and really play as hard as he can and show them what he's made of. They're probably scared to see Ramondre Stevenson run around all their secondaries. So, Stevenson, it's your time. Make it happen.
I haven't called out Spencer Rattler yet this season because it's just far too easy to call out the quarterback. He's the guy that everybody has their eye on. He's the guy, in most cases, whom the outcome of the game depends upon. But this game today is really going to be an indication of the kind of quarterback that Spencer Rattler has become this season under Lincoln Riley's tutelage. Because the interception that ultimately lost the Sooners the game in Ames on October 3rd was egregiously poor. It was a bad late game decision by Spencer Rattler, and it cost the Sooners in a big way. Ever since then, he hasn't been immune from mistakes, but he's displayed a great degree of poise at times, especially for a redshirt freshman. Now, I'll bring back the word validate, Shannon. He needs to validate that with a strong performance in the Big 12 championship today. Prove that he can play on the big stage, the biggest of stages.
Yes.
Uphold the standard in Norman, Oklahoma with a Big 12 championship and lead his team to victory.
He's really matured throughout the season as well. We kind of saw him in that baby stage at first, and then those 2 losses came, kind of gave him a slap on the wrist. And now he's 5-game winning streak, 6-game winning streak. I think Spencer Rattler's really going to show out and really be ready to perform. He's been dreaming about this his entire life.
All right, let's lock in our picks. With that said, Caroline, are you taking the Sooners or are you taking the Cyclones?
Matt Campbell has done a phenomenal job, guys, with this Iowa State team. I think they go into the Big 12 championship and they come out on top against the Sooners 38-28. It's going to be a lot like we saw earlier in the season, and they're going to rattle Spencer Rattler early on in the game. I think it stays close for a while, but in the end, the turnovers, the mistakes by Oklahoma are going to be capitalized on by Iowa State, and they come out on top.
Sounded like Bill Belichick over there, Caroline. Do your job. Okay,
Exactly.
So Caroline took Iowa State, Shannon. Do you agree?
I can't sound like Bill Belichick over here. Caroline, why'd you have to do that here? OU's going to win. I said it earlier, 35-27. They have not lost a Big 12 championship in 5 years, so they're going to win. It's going to be a well-fought battle between both teams. Both teams are good on the road, and they're both here in Arlington. So it's going to be a good game. It's going to be tight, but OU will take the win, 35-27.
I'm with you, Shannon. I also am taking
Good.
the Sooners. Caroline, you are outvoted. But we've seen the Sooners here before each of the last 3 seasons. They've always delivered, always made plays when they needed to make plays, and I think that speaks to Lincoln Riley's leadership more than anything else. I also just look at this Oklahoma team and how they're looking on both sides of the football right now. This team's firing on all cylinders. This is not the same team that walked into Ames and got beat at the beginning of October.
I think that's
It's
your
not.
favorite thing to say is OU is firing on all cylinders. You said that a couple times this season, and I agree. Ever since their loss to Iowa State, they've fired on all cylinders.
I like the Sooners 38-16. I really think this is going to be a convincing victory for Oklahoma because as well-rounded and as fundamentally sound a football team as Iowa State is, let's call it like it is. The Sooners are more talented on both sides of the football, and I think that will manifest itself this morning in a very dominant performance from Oklahoma.
Completely agree with you.
You just have to trust Oklahoma more
Yes,
so than
yes,
Iowa State.
trust
in
the
this scenario.
process. Trust Oklahoma, and they're going to do it.
They're rolling right now. I think they stay rolling today. Now, as we wrap up here, this may be our final Game Day U of the season. We hope to bring you a bowl show. There is no guarantee. Caroline, sad that you couldn't be with us today, but definitely
about
glad
you.
that you could join us from Norman for this edition of Game Day U.
Yeah, guys, this might be our last ride, but it sure was a fun season. I'm glad that I got to spend it alongside you guys, Parker and Shannon, of course, Kurt and Jared and everyone else that made this show possible. So I'm glad that you guys are able to be down there at AT&T Stadium today, and I wish I was there with you.
Well, we certainly wish you were here too, Caroline. It's not quite the same without you, but we'll do our best to hold it down on this end here today from AT&T Stadium. Shannon, as we run up against the conclusion of another football season, any final thoughts, reminiscences you want to share?
You know, I hate the end of football season. It's sad, and I hate to say it, but Parker's leaving us. We're not going to see him again for a while. Great last show with you here, buddy. Caroline, I wish you were here, but it's okay. It happens. You were in your little box over there, but I hate to see the end of football season and Parker Thune go. It's a tough look for me. Like, why is this happening? It's a fever dream.
Sad hugs all the way around once we get off the air here, but definitely want to acknowledge everybody that makes this show happen behind the scenes and everybody that has contributed in such a meaningful way, especially with all the changing circumstances amidst a pandemic this season. Kurt Watson, Dylan Rivera, Will Blessing, Lynn Franklin, David Candy, Barry Orr, Ken Fisher, just a few of those among the people that make this show happen on a week-to-week basis and do all they can for our production. Also want to shout out our tremendous photographer, Sydney Jordan, who has done some fantastic work throughout the season. With that, we call it a wrap here from AT&T Stadium. This has been Game Day U from Arlington, Texas.